required to do great work and to be a master of your craft, but also some of the dangers that come with it. And sometimes we can let the details go, get a little lax and shoot from the hip, and we can see some problems arise there. So I love that you brought this topic up to the table. Know that you embody the ideals of the craftsman, and looking forward to rapping about it today.
Yeah, the craftsman came from the Culture Index. It's like a HR assessment type thing. We all did it, what, 4 years ago, maybe? I've done it a couple of times since with my team. And it's the craziest thing, dude. Like it gives you like 50 words. You search, or whatever words resonate with you, you circle them or select them. It's an online thing. And then it's like the first portion is like, who do you think you are? And like what resonates you is like your everyday life. And then it gives you another set of 50 words. And it says, how do you think you should be at work? So it's like an HR, career type of assessment thing. And it helps you with hiring and understanding who your team is and all that stuff. Anyway, long story short, I used different emails each time, and it was like a year in between each assessment. So like, I don't remember exactly what the words were, but there's 16 different profiles that are, once you complete it, that you fall into like one of those 16. And every single time I have been the craftsman. And I'm like, so and my role has changed over time too, like within work. Like I don't do the same tasks or things that I did 5 years ago that I do now. So anyway, I looked into this craftsman thing and I'm like, okay, what does this really mean? And, part of it is the attention to detail. And I think that's correct. Now, I'm not a good speller. I'm not a good typer. Like when I type on Teams, it's always misspelled. Like I'm not saying like perfection, but it's obsession with the details and the little things. And it's being aware of the little things that matter, and diving into the details to make sure something from A to B goes as smoothly as possible. So it's an interesting topic. And I think I embody this in everything that I do. Like I review something and I'm like, man, why isn't this working? It's not like I never really give up. Like I dive into the details and the source of the problem to figure out how I can fix it, make it better. Now it's not for everybody. And I think that everyone has their own profile, right? That's why there's 16 of them. But the obsession to details, I think, really does paint a really good picture for how you present various things throughout your life to other people.
Absolutely. And as I was preparing for this one, it really made me think about it because I went back to the quote that drives me nuts sometimes, which is how you do anything is how you do everything. And I push on that and break that down because for me, it is totally different. Like when it comes to obsession with detail, if it comes to something like quality control or putting something together, let's talk IKEA furniture or stuff around the house. I'm not great at it. Like I will skip certain details, always have a few parts left over. If I'm putting something together with IKEA, which is always concerning.
If I can't put it together quickly, I always tell Kimberly, I'm like, they made it wrong. They made it wrong. Why do you have a drill for an IKEA furniture?
Well, I always go back to the, no, there's just spare parts. They give you extra. And I just find a piece of that. But that aside, I think where I am extremely detail oriented is when it comes to other humans and human interaction, almost hyper observant on kind of micro expressions and how people are showing up. And I think that just comes with kind of like you said, what's ingrained with you and your personality. So looking at where in our life we are obsessed with the details is a pretty good indicator of where we should be spending our time and working on our craft or what craft we're pursuing in general.
Yeah. And I think it's about forecasting the future. Like, one of the episodes back, we talked about Robert Greene's book, Mastery. And in order to achieve mastery is like, you have to be able to marry knowledge with intuition. And with intuition, you've got to know what's coming. Like you have to be able to forecast well. And if you're not paying attention to the details, you're not going to be able to forecast well. And so you've got to be able to dive into certain industries and certain situations or whatever you've got. So if you've got this 3-year plan and it sounds like, oh my gosh, like this 3-year plan, it sounds too grand or too big or whatever. But if you can break it down in little details and just focus on the little things, and then, it builds up to that plan, you find that success 3 years later, and then you don't even realize you've hit that success or set those goals 3 years ago. But the point is, when you bring those details back and you pay attention to them and you're aware and you can forecast where you're going, and that gives you the ability to pivot and learn and continue down the path, as opposed to, oh my gosh, I was completely blindsided by this thing. And it's because you weren't aware of the detail. You didn't do your research. You didn't prepare. You didn't, have the foresight to understand what's possible, which, the awareness piece comes from confidence, it comes from experience, it comes from expertise, and it comes from taking action. Like, you can't achieve awareness if you're not actually out there trying the things you're going for, right? Like, you don't know what's possible until you try them.
We might be getting a little background noise in this episode. We got an awesome storm rolling through.
Yes, we do.
The
Arizona monsoon.
I think you bring up a great point in regard to, as we obsess over the details, and you talk a lot about being the ability to pivot. In our business, we call it being audible ready. There are a number of sports metaphors we use on this podcast, but the only way that you can be audible ready and shoot from the hip and make changes is the obsession of those details. When you think about Brady, his knowledge of an offense, of defensive reads, the only reason he was able to make those adjustments mid-game, mid-play, is because of an obsession to detail in the ins and outs, what could go wrong, mitigation plans. And I think that, while kind of preparing for this podcast, really came to mind. That's why we obsess over the details, is because nothing ever rarely goes according to plan.
Correct. And it's your preparation for the action you're about to take. But I don't want listeners to confuse this with, you're so focused on the details that you can't even launch or publish. That's not what we're talking about. We're not saying like, this has to be perfect before I can even set it out into the world. No. That's not what we're saying at all. What we're saying is, pay attention to the details to get it to that launch point, just enough to where you can then test it and trial and error and all that. But then the details are the feedback and what you get in return by launching that. So then listening to those details and then reiterating and implementing and fixing. So like Brady's case, his rookie year, he was not nearly aware or had the foresight of what the defense was going to do that first year versus his 20th year, right? It was all of the combined efforts of his preparedness as well as the action by getting on the field and learning on the fly how things are going to go. And then you see the same thing so many times and you find these patterns. You're like, that goes back to the forecasting. I almost think I know exactly what Ray Lewis is going to do in his position, because I've watched so much film on him. In his first game against him, he probably got smoked, but in his 20th game against him, he had his tells. He knew exactly where, if he looked this way and threw that way, Ray wasn't going to be in the box to be able to stop the screen pass or whatever, right? And so that's the purpose and the point that I want to make is you're not so focused on the details to the point that you're not launching. You're focused on the details to get to launch point, and then you're taking the feedback in return and reiterating on those details and being aware of the changes you need to make.
I love that you jumped into that kind of early in the episode, because I had that in my notes, as well as the dark side of obsession to detail. Which its neighbor is perfectionism, which we talk about on this podcast a lot, and nothing's going to be perfect. It's back to that being prepared for the unexpected, nothing going to plan. But if we get to, there is a psychological disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder. We have a couple folks in our circle that actually have that, and that can be debilitating. If you need a specific set of conditions to execute on a task, that can also be a liability. So it's like everything, it's this fine line of, yes, obsession to detail, but what's good enough to actually achieve the goal that we're intending to execute on, right?
Right. Yeah, and I think that you're right, 100%. There's people in my circle too, personal, that that have the obsessive compulsive, and that just gets lost in their thoughts and they just continue to spiral, not spiral, but just like they just continue to hone in on it before they can actually get to a point where they can execute or move on from that thought. But yeah, it comes down to like, you have to build and work and put things out there in order to find that perfection piece. And then once you figure out that, okay, I can perfect this performance or this task or this routine to the point where you don't even think about it, you're on autopilot because you've done the work, you've done the preparation, but again, you've put it in action to learn and reiterate. And then you now have this level of craftsman, if you will, that you just are on autopilot and you just go and people are like, man, how do you do that? And it's like, well, I put in, I don't know how many hours learning how to do a certain skill, and you launch before you're ready. And you can teach yourself anything if you just put your mind to it and sit there and focus on why it's working, what it's not, or why it's not working, and then continue to hone in on making that a better process. So it is a bit scattered in the beginning. It's hard to focus on the details when you don't know what you're doing. And I think that's the other side of this conversation is like maybe you haven't mastered anything yet, or whatever you're trying to do is so brand new that like, how can I be good at this? It is the little details. Like if I do task A and then task B, what happens when I do task C? Okay, that didn't work, or this did work. And then it's like, if I do task C, what happens when I do task D, or whatever? And like, what's the outcome going to be for my client or my friend or whatever I'm going to do? And so it's just continuing to figure out what is the awareness piece that I have to make this better.
100%. I think that the obsession to detail, it also, to bring this theme together, has diminishing returns, right? I look at it from a sales perspective, preparing for calls. Most of the time, 80% of my preparation goes wasted and it isn't even used on the calls, but it's the background obsession to those details that allow the conversation to happen, even though I didn't use the material. Or it'll be 2 steps later in the process that those dots connect from that obsession to detail. So you feel like it's wasted at the time, but it has compounding effects as you go through steps throughout a process, whatever you're doing. That's a specific, sales perspective. And if you get too obsessed over the details in the minutia, you'll miss the big picture of the problem you're trying to solve.
I love that you brought that up, because do you ever feel like you're your own worst critic, where like you prepared so much and then your conversation went a completely different way and you didn't need all that preparation or need all those details, but you had them in your back pocket, and then you still like, you're like, shoot, I forgot about that, or I didn't say the right thing. And then you're like, but to the customer or the prospect, like you nailed it, right? You gave them all the information that they needed, but you're like, man, that didn't go as well as I thought because I didn't say this or say that or say, but you had the preparation piece and the foundation in order to close the deal. So like, what does it matter? But then you go back and you're like, why did I obsess over all those details? And I didn't even get to say half the things I wanted to say. Or if you're preparing for a presentation or a public speaking engagement or something, and you didn't even share the story that you wanted to share because you were just it diverted into a different direction, and then you kind of beat yourself up about it. Like, how often are we our own worst critic, that we didn't do what we thought we were going to do, or it didn't go as planned, but in the end, the result or the perception of how you handled the situation was stellar?
Dude, I hadn't even thought about this until you just brought that up, but I find it even more with running the guided meditations, breath work, and hypnosis. Almost every time, so I put so much time in matching the music and the flow and the progression of it. And a good example was up at Summit when we, moved that session outside. We had to cut it short. It was cut short by a ton. It was totally different than what I had prepared for. And I was actually super, super frustrated as we moved into the next one because it didn't go according to my obsession of details as I prepped for it. It was just like, let it go. Like you were able to get through it, chop it down, adjust and pivot. But I think that is a part of the obsession to details. You put so much energy and time into it that you want it to go off as you envision and had designed it.
But that's exactly the purpose of having that obsession of details in your preparation, because it allows you to go off topic a little bit or divert a little bit and do, because you know that you've got the foundation that you can fall back on something if it goes a little wonky. It never will go wonky, even if you don't do it exactly the way you thought it would go, but you prepared so well that if it goes this direction, you can always come back if you need to, but you may not have needed to. So 80% of your preparedness or topics that you want to talk about or the flow didn't go as you thought. But from my perspective, being in that circle and going through the exercise, it was unbeknownst to me that didn't go the way you wanted it to go. And I thought it was great, right? And so that's like, okay, but had you not prepared and you were just winging it, maybe some of us would have been able to tell. But you weren't, because and it didn't go the same way as you prepared, but you were obsessed over the details, and now you are able to go off the cuff and build a whole session around, the flow of the session, the flow of the day, and the environment.
That's why I love these conversations, because even though over prepared, looking at my notes, I'm staring right back at a perfect example in real world in my MacBook. And Steve Jobs and Jony Ive, who is the lead designer at Apple. And the whole reason we have these devices that we look at every day, wearing them on our wrists, checking the device in our pocket, is because of Jobs and Ive's obsession with how the inside of this MacBook looks from the the motherboards, the inside of the device that I will never see in this lifetime. Jobs didn't care. It needed to look that way on the inside of the machine to his spec, perfection. And the team was like, no one's ever going to see this, Steve. Why are we wasting all this money and time and energy on something no one's ever going to see? And he was like, because I know, and I'm trying to build the best product that there is. And if you like put the devices on top of each other, the edge of your Apple Watch, the edge of your phone, the edge of your iPod case, the rounded edges will all match. They're the exact same spec on each device. And everyone wonders why everyone has 7 or 8 of these devices in their household, or maybe even one individual. And it's because of that obsession to detail.
That's such a great example. The dude is such a creative genius and innovator and designer. Like, and it's so simple. There's nothing to it. Like, to the naked eye, like, it's just like there's nothing to it. There's nothing special about the design other than it's so simple and sleek, and it is in tune with every single product that they put out. And that's the little things. You have so much attention to detail that you make it so similar, or you make it consistent across the board, that you can replicate this stuff. If you're not paying attention to details, you can't replicate what you're trying to build or what you're trying to make to then scale at a larger or to expand at a larger scale as you continue to grow. There's a game. You ever played the game Pass the Pigs? You never heard of this game? Okay, there's this game. It's like, dude, they're like 2 little like rubbery pigs. They're only like this big, and there's 2 of them, and you throw them like dice. And they land in a certain way. Like if it lands up on its nose, it's called a snouter, you get 10 points. If it lands like flat on its back, it's like 5 points or whatever. And there's like orientations of how they can land. Well, they actually land, like it'll land like on a tilt, like on its one leg and on an ear and on its face. And like they're tiny. It's like, how does that, like I'm rolling it. Like I'm not like setting them. I'm rolling it and they just land in these positions.
Yeah.
Whoever designed those freaking pigs had to have gone through how many times to figure out exactly the detail that like, to the minimal millimeter or whatever lowest size you can be. Like this ear is just a tad too big, so I need to make it just a little smaller, so that way this can happen on a higher probability or whatever, right? To design these stupid little pigs. Like the attention to detail.
Look into that and add that to the game.
It's called Pass the Pig. The kids love it. It's a fun camping game. We played it when we were in Havasupai, but it just reminded me, talking about building products and being perfect, building them to perfection so that way they work the way they're intended to. Like you have to go through so many trials and tribulations to figure out what that perfect product is. But again, it goes back to, there's no way they would have built that perfect pig or that perfect iPhone if they didn't just build one and see how it worked, right? And then you learn and build it again and build it again.
Absolutely. And I think with both of us coming from a software background, you get the opposite end of that in regard to and back to your original point, of shipping too late. If you are worried about a second order solution or feature, button, workflow, you probably have shipped too late. You're missing out on the feedback from the actual minimum viable product that you're going to get feedback from the market on. And so it's back to that sweet spot, that tipping point of what's a minimum viable product to bring value to the market, attention to detail, but not getting so tense and so strict on parameters and the outcome that you can't produce anything. Yeah. And so we're back to this balance, this yin and yang of trying to find that sweet spot to hit our marks.
Well, and going to the dark side, like spending too much time on something that's really irrelevant. I've done that a lot. Like, when you're building something and you're like just designing a page, like a PDF of something, and you're like, I don't like where that is, so I'm going to move it here. I'm like, I don't like the size of that, so I'm going to make it here. Like, no one cares. Like, the value's there because the information's there. But like where it is, like I'm not a marketer or an advertiser or anything like that, but I still have an eye for graphic design and want to make things. But there's a lot of time spent, whereas someone else could just put together this one pager and probably get the similar result. But I will find myself spending so much time in trying to perfect the look and feel of this one pager, which maybe in the long run that helps me. I don't know. But I do feel like when you spend that much time, I could have just shipped it sooner and then moved on to the next thing and worked on something else. But that's where I find trouble in myself, being the craftsman, if you will, is like I do spend a lot of time on the design aspects of something that is so minuscule on a 1-page document, or even like a Facebook or Instagram post or something, like designing that like can take a lot of time. And I don't mind spending it, maybe just because I find joy in putting that stuff together. It's almost like it's kind of just lets me unplug, and it's brainless activity to me and just kind of flow. But still, that level of detail is intense. And I'll spend like 2 hours on something that, it doesn't matter if it should only take 15 minutes or not, but I want it to be perfect in that little corner or that size, that little thing. It's like past the pigs game. It's got to be perfect or whatever. And I do find that it can be it's a challenging thing to overcome, where sometimes I'm like, screw it, I'm done. I'll come back to it tomorrow, or we're just going to post it or ship it or whatever and see what happens. So there is definitely a balancing act, and it is challenging to kind of balance that out.
I think the biggest call to action for the listeners is, where are you not putting enough attention to detail? Could be in your career, could be the home life, right?
Attention to detail with who you're spending your time with. What's going on with them? What's going on in their world? So often we get self-centered and thinking about what's going on with us that you forget about the awareness and like what's going on with someone else, or asking the right questions of how was your day and what can I do to be a resource for you, or what do you think about this, or whatever, right? Like we get lost in what we're trying to pursue and what we're trying to do, that paying attention to details and being aware of the people that are in your home, or, that, and not losing sight of that communication. 100%. That's
not just your details, your tribe's details. That's a great
point. And how do you set
up
them up for success? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's a very important point.
I do too. Well, speaking of shipping it, I think that's a good stopping point on the Obsession to Detail podcast. Again, take a look in your life. Where can you be spending a little more time on the nuances and the details in your life? And where are you spending too much time? Where are you over sharpening the sword as opposed to taking action? Always a good thing to reflect on. And we'll be back at you next week.
Yep.